Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Thibaud with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at Blast Think and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast. This episode is brought to you by Hilltop Energy Incorporated. For over 70 years, this independently owned company has provided explosive sales and exceptional blasting services. With the focus on quality service, Hilltop Energy is results-driven where the customer is the boss. Hilltop Energy services the Northeast United States out of 5 locations to help clients reach final grade. From hand-mixing fuel and fertilizer in the 50s to operating today's modern equipment and techniques, Hilltop Energy has been helping you break new ground. Go to hilltopenergy.com to learn more about superior services. We got Tom Young here, everybody. Thank you for being on the show, Tom.
Honored to be here.
So, I've heard Hilltop for a while, that name Hilltop, and then when we started this podcast, your name was brought up because they said you've got a story or two.
Oh, yeah, I have a story or two.
And
Some I'd like to forget.
So, some of them I hope you'd share. And so if we're here, I'd like to just get an opportunity for you to tell me who's Tom and what was your first time around explosives and why did you decide to stay?
Well, it goes back a little ways, and I'm going to go back several generations. My great-grandfather sold house coal in southern Illinois. The family's from Carterville. My grandfather was introduced to mining immediately. Back in those days, that's the turn of the century, and was working in his father's mine at 12. But he didn't want that for a career, and he put himself through college. He took 8 years to get a 4-year degree, worked a year, saved money, and went to a year to college, and ended up after that as a mining engineer, and worked as an underground superintendent in Eastern Coal around the Pittsburgh area, and later joined DuPont and finished his career with DuPont. My father,
was he manufacturing at DuPont?
No, he was a technical rep.
rep.
He was underground testing new product.
Permissible explosives?
Permissible.
Wow, I've never had an opportunity to use that.
And he had very little surface experience. And then my father, he graduated from Carnegie Mellon, but he ended up in the explosive industry like my grandfather. He started with DuPont, and we as a family moved away when he quit DuPont in the West Virginia, Kentucky area, and then rejoined DuPont a few years later, and they moved us to Seattle. Spent my junior high and high school years out there. Changed jobs from DuPont, and that moved us to Ohio. I went to Ohio University, and when I graduated, I had done no interviewing and had nothing going. I had a liberal arts degree, and so
what did you want to study?
I was in pre-law, political science.
Mm-hmm.
Took a lot of courses in that direction, but again, out on the street with nowhere to go.
Explosives in the family, and it just keeps
pulling
you in, huh?
Yeah, so I got a job shoveling drill cuttings behind the drill at a family-owned coal mine that my father helped me get. And they also did their own blasting and did some blasting for other mines in the area. So after that, a little bit of experience there, I got on their powder crew for 2 years, and I had enough experience to interview with some of the majors.
And did you work directly with your father?
No.
On purpose?
Yeah, I think he wanted me to carve my own way, for sure. But anyway, I interviewed. I found a headhunter, which got given a little help on how to find him, and he set up interviews with me for Ensign Bickford, Austin, and Atlas Powder. and I had offers from all three. College grad, 2 years experience, blaster's license and stuff. I had a good starter resume. So I selected Atlas, which I think was an awesome choice. They were brand new in emulsions at that time, and they were leading the way. So I got a first-hand view of a product that had started in the early 70s, and I was with Atlas in 77. So they didn't even know what it could do or how to utilize it.
It was
all evolving. And at that point, at that time, the sequential timer was brand new. So I cut my teeth on that, and the end of regular delay blasting with the condenser CD blasting machine was coming to an end. The sequential timer was rising to dominance. I watched that develop, and then somewhere around the mid 80s, non-electric detonators began emerging as the dominant product, and as soon the sequential timer was left in the dust and everyone moved to non-electrics. Then around the turn of the century, I watched the transition to electronics, and now our company that I'm with and the industry as a whole, as I'm sure you're aware, is now moving faster than ever to electronics.
Mm-hmm. So was there a time like when you felt like your grandfather worked for DuPont and your father worked for DuPont? Was there a big push for you to go to DuPont?
No, no, there wasn't. And I don't know quite why that was, except maybe they saw that the DuPont wasn't as committed as they were, and I was told that Atlas powder was up and coming, and said that's where you should go.
That's going to be a better career path.
Yeah, and so, but it was only with them 2 years, and my father was working for a company called International Minerals and Chemicals. They had bought Trojan U.S. powder. Trojan was a smaller regional explosive manufacturer, and they were coming up with a new fuel for ammonium nitrate, and they called it 𝗕𝗃. 𝗕𝗃, and this was before or right around the time Atlas began blending emulsions with ANFO, and had come up with a product that could augment down the hole, which was slightly waterproof, or depending on the amount of emulsion and the diameter of the borehole, they were going as high as 50/50, and it could sleep. But this 𝗕𝗃 product was not waterproof, but it was a higher energy fuel. We were crushing the drill to get more density in the hole, and introducing it to the mines. Well, that product had was very fumy, and was bad in the summer. And then the fact that it was crushed drill, it wasn't very waterproof, and it kind of disappeared from the market. So, and I saw that coming. So I left International Minerals and Chemicals and joined Gulf Oil, and they had an explosive division then, and they had some bulk slurries, and package slurry. So that was a good run there, about 4 years.
Similar. What was the type of fuel? Yeah, what was the type of fuel you?
Nitropropane. The parent company, International Minerals and Chemicals, produced it. It was a part of nitromethane, nitroethane, nitropropane. They were all used in the commercial industry. Nitromethane was used as very high price fuel used in top fuel dragsters. That's what they call it. And the other two were used in inks, fast drying inks, their additives, things like that. The propane, though, was a byproduct, and they had no way to get rid of it. So they found this method, yeah. But it didn't prove. Again, it didn't prove out.
And it didn't take off. Is there a certain situation, like early on in your career, where you decided this is right for me, and glad I didn't keep my political science career going? You know, I'm sure there's still lots of debating going on in the office and on the bench, but what was
I haven't looked back on that too much. When I was with Gulf, we had a very good package, a water gel product, and it was used extensively throughout the East. And I had a distributor, 𝗧𝗵𝗀 𝗕𝗹𝘀𝘀, and the owner, Alan Dickey, had several other businesses, but he had some health issues, and in his 50s, he decided to put a manager on top of each of his businesses. We had agricultural distribution, we had a fuel oil company, we had ready-mix concrete, and we had explosives. So he put a manager on top, and I was put on the top of Hilltop Energy. The Hilltop Energy was formed separate, our parent company, for insurance reasons, but I joined them in 1986. Been there ever since.
And the story,
yeah. So I had 10 or 12 years of 3 or 4 different explosive manufacturers, and then settled in. There was several reasons. One was to raise a family and not travel. The career path is still. A lot of my peers have lived in some pretty nice places and done some pretty extensive travel, but they, 15, 20 nights a month on the road, building their career. I was home every night. Yeah, and it's been an excellent place to work. And I still kept my contacts that I'd formed in the previous 12 years. I've been coming here to the ISE since I joined in 84. So, this is my 38th year. The SEE at that time was formed in Ohio. So I had a lot of information on the early days of that, being local. So this year I'm actually going on the board to help out.
You are.
Yes.
Good. Congratulations.
Well, we'll see.
No.
I'm getting ready to retire this year, at least 80% retired, and the owner of our company has agreed to let me participate and to help mentor for a year or so my guys that are going to be taking my position.
We need good leadership, and it's great to see new people feel like they want to help fill that role. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Is there when you were younger, and you were introduced to the SEE and things like that, was there a certain person who was a big mentor to you in your industry, or did it not come from the society? Did it come from just picking up a stemming shovel and actually working with somebody on the bench?
Well, there was a gentleman that mentored me a lot in the very early days when I was out of college. There was a guy named 𝗧𝗵𝗲 who was a blaster and taught me all of the things that I needed to know to safely blast. I spent 2 years with him before I got my Pennsylvania blaster's license. He had a way about him. He was a good instructor. We spent a lot of nights after work in the bars talking about powder, so I was deeply immersed in it. He was an old schooler. He learned from the person before him. He was not professionally trained, because he knew how to blast, and that was. But he had a lot of colloquialisms, I guess you call them. One of the ones I always remember, and I use it to this day. Is don't worry about the mule going blind. Just put the shit on the wagon. Whenever we say, but this, but that, he said, don't worry about the mule.
Awesome. That's a good one.
Yeah, well, there's some others that I'm not going to
keep going. Come on, I want to hear them.
Well, one that he told me that when we were out in the bars, he'd say, whatever you do, if you're not going to be home, don't call your wife. So why? Just because you're going to catch hell on the phone, and you're going to catch hell when you get home. You might as well catch hell when you get home.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
That got me into trouble.
That one got you into trouble.
I never listened to that one too much.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of good colloquialisms that I've heard over the years, and half of those are I wish I could remember. You know, there's only so many that you hear. Someone recently told a guy from Bolivia recently told me, he says, "What's the plural of y'all?" And I'm from Tennessee, you know, so I'm like, I should know this. Y'all is plural. And he's like, no, it's not. It's all y'all. And I was like, yeah. He goes, y'all going to the bar tonight? Yeah. All y'all? Yeah.
Now you're talking to everybody.
Yeah, now you're talking to everybody. So
that is really creeping into our culture.
Yes.
Way beyond the South.
It's awesome. So when you were working with him on that bench those first 2 years, you know, learning about the products, were there situations where you decided, you know, hell yeah, I'm into this? Like,
pretty cool.
It was cool what my grandfather did and my dad did, you know, but now I know why they did it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and they were both alive, of course, and they both coached me. So, and they could tell me stories. So they kind of put me in a position with their wisdom to keep my head a little bit above the fray as far as moving on to my next job. So that was good. And you know, it was morning to dark every night loading shots, 70 hours a week. A lot of shots.
Is there some stories there from your parent or from your father there that you can share?
Well, my
grandfather
would always he had some property up in near the Allegheny National Forest, and outside of a little town called Marionville, and he did a lot of stumping. So he'd always scarf off the little explosives, and we learned how to blow some stumps out of the ground as a young lad. And then my father would take me out on a shot bench once in a while in the days before AM shot,
mm-hmm.
the days before when you could just, a 12-year-old could be out on the shot bench.
Yeah, go pick up that box and bring that over there.
So I've been around it a lot. And I can remember when my dad was with DuPont, he would go down to his little office in the basement when we lived in Madisonville, Kentucky. And he would be ordering for the mines. He'd make his rounds as a sales rep and pick up orders, and then phone them on a tape. He had a dictaphone that he'd send his orders in. I guess they wanted it recorded, but I'd be down there listening to him talking to a microphone on a recorder in the early days. That's probably cutting edge technology in the middle 60s. So that was when the ammonium nitrate revolution was going on, and drill was over from dynamite in the late 50s and early 60s.
How old were you before you got that first headache? 12 years old.
But you know what's interesting is when I got out of I went to Ohio University where I graduated and got on a blasting crew. We used, because it was Trojan, we used a cast booster.
Mm-hmm.
Trojan Super Prime cast booster. And
that was TNT at the time?
TNT, kind of like,
50-50.
The best booster on the market, generally recognized now, pure kind of like booster. So I never touched dynamite the first 2 years that I was in the business. It was until I joined Atlas. And DuPont had giving up on dynamite. They were trying to make their water gels replace dynamite. They were having trouble with that, but Atlas still was holding on to dynamite. They still had a full run of dynamites. And so distributor that was my customer that I was primarily assigned to, they were still using a lot of dynamites, prime AMFO and emulsions. So that's where I got introduced to dynamite headaches.
I was I wasn't really affected by them too much. I never really had a big problem with them. I guess some people are more susceptible to it than others. Some people can't even smell the stuff. But
Yeah, it didn't bother me too much. You get it on your hands, and you start sweating, and you start rubbing your forehead in the summertime. That can get to you.
For me, it was moving boxes in the magazine. Not so much airflow in the magazine. Now you're really sweating, and you put the box on the truck, and then you take your hard hat off and wipe your forehead.
Yeah.
That's the first one I had, and I was just like, okay, this is what they're telling me about.
You crossed the line. You had your dynamite.
Yeah, I was like, okay, all right. I was sitting here thinking like I was some lucky guy that I was like, no, not for me. You know, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I can hardly, you know, I'm a small guy, so it's like I can't pick up the boxes as fast as they can. You know, for every two boxes I move, they're moving 4 for the most part. And I didn't have to stop as much, but then that hit, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that stays with you for a little while.
Yeah.
Always was fine by the end of the day or the next morning.
Now, did you when it came to your father's stories, were there any specific stories on a pattern that he shared or anything like that? Were there any good lessons that he taught you? You know, like a lot of saying that some old, guys used to say, "Load her high, let her fly," or something like that. You know, there's old blasters and there's bold blasters, but there's no old bold blasters. You know,
No, nothing like that. The best advice kind of along those lines that he gave me is, I remember him saying, his phrase was, "Keep your nose clean and you'll do fine in this industry." And it's a small industry, and your reputation does follow you. And I think that was, I've been approached over the years about kickbacks, things like that. Hey, fudge this, fudge that. I wouldn't touch that. There's no way that I would tarnish my reputation by getting involved in not being the employee that I was hired to be, and given responsibility. I've always believed that you'll be, if you prove worthy, you'll be given more. And I've always operated under that. So I think probably the best advice my dad gave me.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for something like that.
Yeah, we are. And it's so in our industry, it's just change a number here or there.
Pretty easy to.
But I have to say, I think all of my colleagues are impeccable that way. They would grind from that one, like you should.
Yeah, I think that there's one thing that's nice about the society here is I think that's a general consensus.
Yeah.
If you're going to be at this kind of if you're going to be at this kind of event and around these kind of people, be very successful, and making a whole career out of it for as long as you have. Well, how long have you been at Hilltop? 39 years?
38 years, and this is my 50th year. I started in 75, and at the end of 24, it'll be here.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, before you got to Hilltop, had you experienced anything, or before Hilltop was created, were you wanting to travel and go far away? I mean, did you do a lot of travel around the United States, or were you mainly in one region?
When I was with Trojan U.S. Powder / International Minerals and Chemicals, and when I was with Gulf, I did a lot of travel, mainly in the East. But I was with the development of some bulk slurries in Florida. Got to see the operations in South Florida as far as the pumping of emulsions in the pits down there, the underwater blasting, and was in New England, was in the Carolinas, was out in Missouri, Illinois. Never did a whole lot out west as far as if I'm lacking any experience, it's in Western mining and Western coal, but throughout the East, I've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah. Any excuse me, any unique projects that you were on that kind of stand out? Any ones that you were like, damn, I wish I had never been called for that?
Well, not really. I mean, we've had a few failures. We had a project up in Michigan that just couldn't be done the way it was. It's a civil project, and we were drilling through, I don't know, 10 or 15 feet of clay to scalp off 10 feet of 2 feet of limestone to put in a sewer, and there was no way we could blast tubes of limestone under. You couldn't hold the holes. It took all winter to go 300 feet to get these holes done. Now, way over cost, and the customer was unhappy, and it was a win for no one. But that was a small project. That was probably one of my most challenging, disappointing jobs that I bid. But it was a geology problem.
Yeah, tends to be.
Yeah,
tends to be the situation.
over the last generation or so, we're over along the Ohio River, and the Ohio River is an interesting story because first it was canoed and barged, and then they dammed it, and then a railroad track appeared along it, and then after the railroad track appeared, then there was a 2-lane road above the railroad track, and then pretty soon there was a 4-lane road. So everything they did, they cut further and further in the hill, and finally, after enough time, the hill started coming down because it wasn't laid back far. So, beginning in the 90s, state of Ohio and the state of West Virginia began laying back all those slopes, and so those were challenging projects where you've got maybe 300 feet of hill to take down. Start wide at the top and marry it in with the bottom. This wasn't creating new road. This was just stabilizing. So like every few years, they do another section, and usually several $1 million project. And they're still doing it to this day. So we've participated in a lot of that. And then when you're over above a town or you're above a railroad track that has to stay within a highway that they've cut down to 1 lane, and you want your material to stack up on the right side of the hill and not cause traffic delays. Those are challenging.
And rewarding.
Yeah, then they're rewarding too.
Is there a certain project that you've done that you felt, man, that was a nice project, and one that really boost your ego, boost the confidence there,
Well, from a company standpoint, we put in part of the 17-mile bypass around the city of Portsmouth, and that was a multi-million-yard project with some valley fills and some bridges, and we shared that with another explosive company. That was about a 2-year project, and we had as many as 15 people and 6 or 7 drills on that project. Basically lived down there for a couple of years, so that was a nice project. And then right after that, we moved to Covington, Kentucky for do a project for Amazon. And it was completed 3 or 4 years ago, but it was a major addition to their distribution. It was, and the building was at the Cincinnati airport. They took some of their footprint, and that project was to level the hills and put it into the little valleys. It was rolling, one steep ground rolling, and it's pretty easy shooting, but there was a lot there. They had to put in runways, and that building is 800 feet wide and 5,000 feet long.
At that point, they take into the curvature of the earth, right?
He's amazing. It has an amazing building, and they put all the kind of infrastructure around it, and it's got its own area for their jets, or for transport jets and fueling stations and all that kind of stuff. So I that would be, and it's full of product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to get you, and you know how Amazon is, they get stuff to you later the same day.
Yeah. Wow. So when it comes to a career running a company in the explosive industry, has it been, you kind of mentioned the good advice of your father of keeping your nose clean and going. Is there something else there that can kind of mention and lean on over the years?
Well, to back up the story a little bit, Alan Dickey, my customer who asked me to come and run Hilltop, was also another mentor of mine. He believed in service. I think service is where it's at. I mean, back to the Amazon thing, service is, we see what service can do. People don't have to leave their house. And they even sell a Ring doorbell, so the package is protected.
It's true.
So and I looked at water gels, which are now 3 off the market, dynamite, which is off the market, the change in electric detonators, the sequential timer boosted electric detonators to non-electric, to now the electronics. Product quality is important, but those products come and go, and you can't really camp on that. And price is good too, but if you're selling on price, you're only as good as the next guy's price. So service, as an small independent distributor, that's where we get loyalty. Is taking care of them, building strong partner relationships where you've earned the grace to screw up a little bit, but you know that you're working for their success. So that's the course we've taken, and we're not the biggest, but we have a good loyal following. Sometimes we get outpriced by the big guys, but that's part of the deal. Sometimes we get phone calls to come on in. So it's a balance.
And you've maintained some very good friendships with your clients and relationships.
It's beyond the business. It's life together. Well, some of the things Alan said was, pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. That was one of his favorites. As another one was, you can shear a sheep a lot of times, but you can only butcher it once. Which is, don't get out too far on your pricing. Don't get too far out. You want to be fair to your customer balance your service with your pricing.
So what were some of the things that you focused on for service? You mentioned having good service and the value.
Same day, taking phone calls at night. Hey, we got something we need you tomorrow. Can you come? And we jump through all kind of hoops and rearrange the board and get there. That kind of stuff. Sometimes we're given the worst benches in the world, and we them to go do a shot, and the guys are carrying 10 pounds of mud on their feet and with rain dripping off their noses, and all the equipment operators are in quality or environmentally controlled bulldozers and front end loaders and rock trucks, and we're out there on the bench. I mean, we earn that loyalty.
You leave them a new cleaner bench on the next run, right?
Well,
that's the goal.
It's always a challenge. What we're given and what we'd like to see
so kind of sounds like put your head down and go get it done. And don't complain too much about it.
Well, you work with them. Yeah. And when there are bad days and there are situations that are unavoidable, we don't want to see it all the time. I mean, they know how hard we work for them. I think is my point.
Do you have any war stories you're willing to share? Any I said the good, the bad, and the ugly? And any situations where you were sitting there saying, man, this is one of the tough ones, and let me work my way through this as much as I can. I signed up for it and gonna finish this out.
Well,
other than the one that you mentioned with the clay and the 2 feet of limestone and the clay.
we've had instances where misfires.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that disappoint you the most, and I think anybody listening to this would agree. Once in a while, you'll have a shot that'll underperform. With the non-electrics, it was cutoffs on the surface early on, and then that was usually is cutoffs, and then sometimes it's product failure. You're trying to use too inexpensive a product for the condition, and it definitely grates. But several times you'll have a blast over the course of the years. The base will pull out, but the rock won't turn. And you push it out, and now you've got a monument sitting out off of the base, and that's a hazard. You have to dig that out, and the loaders have that over their head. They're undermining it, hoping it falls. That's dangerous. It's just a problem.
You can't get back out onto it to drill it.
I've had that happen with our organization, and sometimes it happens with new products when you're finding the limits.
Mm-hmm.
You're adjusting it to the rock. Those products don't stay around.
Yeah, you going to failure to see how far you can go with that powder factor and what the application is. My nickname was Boom Boom when I was an intern at a underground mine, and our goal was to switch AMFO to emulsion, and to see how far we could do that with the powder factor.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were going to failure, but I had a shot, and the guy who cleared the shot went back and goes, "Yeah, it shot good." I was like, wow, can't believe it. We took out X amount of holes, X amount of pounds, and we came back in the next, and I was happy. So we went up and we told the guys that it was a success, because the guy who cleared the shot said it was all good, because he went back in and saw the bootlegs. But those bootlegs were only about 4 feet deep into or there was a lot of bootleg. And my nickname went from Boom Boom to Bootleg real quick, and I was like, yeah. And so for the rest of that summer, I was called Bootleg, and luckily it was towards the end. But there's definitely application failures but you're pushing it to the limit.
Well, yeah, you want to see it. Sometimes it's just not a good product. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make the grade to stay.
What's your advice on handling misfires? I mean, that's one thing that I had a lot in my career, and I focus on much in my career, in my education.
Well, with a misfire, if you lose a detonator and a booster, they fail to, or you have a column shifter or some kind of interruption in your powder column, it usually shows up fairly quick in the blasting agent area of the hole, assuming that the booster's at the bottom. The top primer, of course, it's in the muck pile somewhere, but usually it's the blasting agent that shows up. As soon as that happens, if you're unaware of it from the shot itself, with electronics, you have a problem. So to a large degree, that issue's gone away, ahead of time. But if unshot explosive is uncovered, we sit on the shot till it's done. We'll isolate the area. And when it's time to load that out, we're there on the ground. We watch every bucket come out, and we'll follow that column down towards the booster area, and then we'll work around it. Generally, we can retrieve it safely. I mean, we've never had a problem yet. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But someone.
But that's just distracting for everybody.
Yes. Yeah. And one thing that I love this industry. One thing I don't like about this industry is a lot of misfires are kind of kept a little hush hush. It's someone's embarrassed. They might have said they didn't connect it right, or you don't see a lot of presentations on misfires. Is my point. You see lots of presentations and case studies on a lot of things, but people aren't really saying, "Hey, look, I did it wrong this way and this way."
We recently had one. We were blasting in a mine that had some caves. It was known for caving, and we watched one down near the bottom, and we lost the booster due to interruption of. So we had to load it, seal it off and load from above. Only one hole in the whole face was like that, thank goodness. And we knew that there was going to be a booster down there at some point. But because we had drone filmed the shot and designed the shot through the photogrammetry and GPS positioned the hole, we knew exactly where it was. And we could go to the customer and point. Now, if it hasn't shoved out, if it's still there close to the face, this is exactly where it is. And that's, that was the first time we had to do this with electronics after being with them now for 15 years or better. That's a hidden benefit. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely, and to go at it with that kind of mentality and detail and using modern technology, the GPS and the drones,
Right.
That gave you an edge compared to what would
Would have been just a few years ago.
And so have you had some other misfires there that you can speak on that our listeners could potentially learn from?
Early on, it's I'd say you've got to match the borehole size to the face height. Large diameter boreholes on short faces are a problem. It's hard to hold the stemming in. It's hard to break the rock. Powder distribution, it's where it's at. You can't
chintz out on drilling.
Don't chintz out on drilling or your powder distribution. It should this be a 3.5 or 4 inch hole, or we have a high enough face, and of course it has to match the equipment digging it. But once you've right sized the borehole to the capability of your customer to dig it, you still want to match the borehole to the face height, or else you're looking at a fly rock potential.
Now, would you looking back over your whole career, you told us some very technical answers, which is nice, and mentioned some of your mentors, and definitely have a background in boosters and in the East. Is there something like a parting knowledge, let's say, that you'd like to share with? When I asked you, would you like to be on a podcast, and you're like, what am I going to talk about on a podcast? What kind of questions? Is there something you kind of want to leave with us? A note for the future.
A note to the men and women that are just getting into management positions and getting off of the shop bench, getting into where you have responsibility for profit, and safety, and costs. Once you get a handle on that process, the sooner you release it to other people, the faster you'll rise. We have 6 locations, and each one's a profit center, and every manager is responsible for that, for his people and his safety and his equipment and his bottom line. And so to get them to that point where they can do that without a lot of attention, and you're not having to micromanage them, it's just extremely freeing, and they get to be creative. They get to polish their own skills, their own people skills. And you have to set up guardrails, and you have to intervene on occasion. Sometimes pretty hard, but over the course of the 37 years, I've mentored a lot of young managers, and that's some of my most enjoyable activities. Phone calls with them, and then watching them make an expensive mistake, but that usually doesn't happen twice. If it does, we got a problem. But I've really enjoyed that, and that's where I'm at right now, releasing 2 guys in particular. In that time with Hilltop Energy, my son joined our company.
What's his name?
Adam, and he's Adam Thomas. So make sure my name was in there somewhere. He had spent 10 or so years with us, and in the same way my father and grandfather mentored me after a couple of years blasting to go out and see the world a little bit, he joined Orica. And Orica's, of course, a large company, so they offer different opportunities and exposures. And he's been there a number of years now. He's in his mid-40s, so that would be our. If you want to count my great-grandfather, that'd be 1, 2, 3. He's fourth. Yeah. And now my granddaughter has just joined the company to drive rock trucks.
Really?
Yeah. And she is going to get on the powder crew one way or the other after a couple of years of mining. She's 18, so she's going to have to be 21 before she can get around explosives, but she will be our sixth generation, whatever.
That's awesome.
So I want to give kudos to my son.
And what made them get into it? What kind of, they just sat there and watched you succeed? Or was there a certain, you told them stories and they heard, growing up, yeah, Dad's going blasting,
All I can say is it's caught, not taught.
Taught, not taught.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a good one. And is he he's off doing his own thing? Did he come and work for you guys for a while?
Yeah, well, he was with Hilltop, as I said, for 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And he traveled a lot for us. So some of these projects that we involved out overnight, he did those. So he came with a lot of experience to Oregon.
We've heard stories of people. Something that's nice about being in the family business and understanding, if your father or your mother was a blaster, that they have invested interest in your success and your safety. So when when your mentor has the interest of you going home at night as a parent, they teach a lot more about safety and are a little more detailed than maybe, let's say, a boss that you might have who's a little more production oriented.
Right.
So I'm sure that has had an impact.
I have never been involved in a fatality. Never really involved in any dismemberment or, debilitating accident to where you had to leave the workforce. So very blessed that way.
That's it should be applauded. It's not always the case.
It's heat and friction. Anyways, you got to be careful. We have a mixed plant, very sensitive to any kind of incidents there. On the bench, it's just got to be careful. It's a much safer industry than it was when I started, but we still got to follow the guidelines and follow the best practice.
Still have our hazards, yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to being the dad, is there anything unique about being the dad on the subject?
Well, it's come full circle for me. I would call my dad in my early and mid-career before he passed away. And he always had that father advice. And then in the year 2000, that disappeared. And the same words that my father gave me, I'm now giving to Adam. So that's been very rewarding to be able to do that.
Thank you so much for coming back on and saying that. I'm sure it's heartfelt and it's something to be proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at Blast Think for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.